geeks and geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, comic book fans from the world over. Welcome back for another edition of Ask Chuck Dixon, a gear jamming, dust flying, road raging episode number 179, where you get to ask me, a seasoned comic book professional, about what I do for a living. And what I do for a living is I write comic books. So let's start with an episode of Eternia Today with the Power of Grayskull reporting, asking the questions, investigating, trying to find out, get to the heart of the matter of what it is I do for a living. And here we go. Have you and Eric July discussed collaboration on more AlphaCore projects? I really like consistency in comics with writers and artists over a reasonably long span. Meaning, I hate it when in the middle of an arc, a new artist or writer jumps in and the book changes. Sometimes slightly, sometimes drastically, and seemingly never for the better. Well, I agree with you. I don't like those changes, but we've got a crew here at Rippaverse, and I don't think anybody's going anywhere anytime soon. If you have looked at my career at all, you know that I'm the kind of guy who gets hired on and I stay till the wheels come off. You know, I stay till they run out of coffee. I stay until I get out of my car in the parking lot and find the place locked tight so I can't get in. Or until I'm kicked out or asked to leave. So I'm with Rippaverse to the end, and so are the Saskas, and Mike Baron has been brought on, and we're all talking with Eric about future projects. I've recently written my 4th project for Rippaverse, handed in the script for that. So yeah, I'm obviously going to stay around a while. No fears there. And, you know, we're hiring consistent talent. Me and Joe Bennett, you know, this most recent project would be my 3rd project with Joe Bennett. So we're having too much fun. Nobody wants to leave. We're here with you, and we agree with you. We don't like drastic changes. We're going for consistency here. Power of Grayskull also asked, given what Marvel has recently done with Frank Castle, done to or with Frank Castle, they certainly did it to him. Have you ever thought of writing a Punisher-type parody, poking fun at modern Marvel's decisions with their legacy characters? Because I sure have, and I'm not a writer, but it seems like fertile ground. Well, I am obviously always attracted to this vigilante justice genre. I write in it often, even aside from the Punisher. But I have 2 different projects. One is called Black Warrant, which will be available from Arctoons and through Archaven quite soon. I've seen art for the 2nd issue, which reminds me I need to write the 4th issue because I like to stay way ahead of things. And Black Warrant is very much in the vigilante justice, Death Wish, Punisher vein, but I take a different angle on it. It's not the same thing. I didn't want to just repeat myself. I don't want to do a pastiche or a pale imitation of Frank Castle, so I came up with an entirely new concept that I think you're really going to dig. It's a totally new approach to this, and it gets, let me tell you right now, it gets dark. But because I love this genre so much, I've also created a more ground-based, street-level character for Rippaverse as well. I don't want to tell you any more about it, but it's very much in the vigilante justice vein, but again, a different approach, a different way of looking at that genre and how that all plays out. So you'll be seeing these in the new year. You'll be seeing these later on down the road in 2024 as they come to completion. And like I said, that 2nd project, which I won't name right now, will be from the Rippaverse. Power of Grayskull also asks, if modern Batman were to use a firearm like he did in his earliest days, what would you have him use? Would he simply pick an existing piece or make one up as though Lucius Fox made a special bat gun just for him? Yeah, I don't like the idea of Batman using a gun. Yeah, I'm a big gun guy. I'm an NRA member. I think guns are fine. You know, especially when battling evil, you sort of need a gun. But it's not part of Batman. I'm not comfortable. And even though I'm a gun nut, I've written lots of impassioned speeches from Batman where he reasons out why he hates guns, why he despises people who use them. Uh, so it doesn't make sense. But since we're playing what if Batman had a gun, it would be a very, very special gun because he's Batman. You know, uh, he would either have it created for him or find someone creating experimental weapons and use that. And my choice would be that he would not use a standard ballistics type weapon, a standard um, gunpowder driven projectile. I would have him use a railgun. And a railgun uses electromagnetism to project a projectile from its barrel. And I would have Batman use this kind of weapon because, number one, it's quieter, it's special, and everything about Batman is special. All of his tools and toys and gadgets should be unique. It also gives him a greater variety of kinds of rounds he could fire electromagnetically. And also, there's no ballistic evidence left behind. A projectile fired from a railgun, there's no lands and grooves. There's no way to identify or trace it back to the actual weapon that it was used. Plus, they just look so damn cool. They don't look like standard regular guns. I'd have to look into it further, but there might be some non-lethal choices that he could have in using a railgun. I'd have to think more on it, but I never will because I'm not going to write Batman again, and I would be loath to arm him up. Nathan Greenberg, when is the next Levon Cade book coming out? Just finished Levon's Range, and I'm eagerly looking forward to the next adventure of the Cade clan. Levon's Scourge, the 12th book in the Levon Cade series, is now available for pre-order on Kindle. As soon as it's available on Kindle, the paperback and audio versions will follow. So you can go to Amazon right now. I'll try to provide the link here below the video. And you can go to Amazon right now and order it. And like I said, it's number 12. And it's the longest of the word count wise of the Levon books. And it's all Levon. It's all Levon. There's not a whole lot of backstory about his family. If you like finding out what's been going on with Mary and Hope and Uncle Fern, this book will be a little bit of a disappointment because it's just all Levon all the time. And it gets rather violent. Cecil Gilmore, if someone wanted to start reading Judge Dredd comics, where would you tell them to start? I would tell them to look for the names John Wagner and Alan Grant, either writing separately or together, and just read them. And it doesn't matter where you come in on the series. The Judge Dredd concept is pretty high concept. I'm not going to say it's simple. It's certainly elegant. And it's easy to understand. There's not a lot of backstory continuity that you really need because Wagner and Grant were really good at reintroducing former continuing characters. So that when you run into Judge Anderson or Judge Hershey or any of those characters, they're all going to be represented to you in a way that will let you know who they are and what the significance of the series is. So yeah, I would just Wagner and Grant, just look for those names. That's what you want to read because they were instrumental in making Dredd who he is and what he is. And they're just all great, great, great stories. Just cream of the crop for Dredd. I mean, other guys do okay, but no one comes close to what Wagner and Grant did. Have you subscribed? If not, why not? If you have subscribed, thank you. Hit the button below. It helps this channel enormously if I can grow the subscription list, which we have been doing in recent weeks and recent months. Rob Marsh, is there any power on earth that could get you to do another Punisher book with JRJR? That power, I guess, would be called Marvel Comics. I mean, I have no power. I can't make that happen. Johnny can't make that happen. But Marvel certainly could. They could pick up the phone and quote us both a figure. And if it was high enough, I'm sure we'd come back and do some more Punisher. I still have a Punisher story that I wanted to do with Johnny I never got to do. That would work perfectly as a reintroduction of the Punisher. Unfortunately, the greatest power that would cause this to happen would be the power of common sense. And I don't think that's, I think that's in rare supply at the House of Ideas. Joe Ketterer, what has been the best part of working with Stallone so far? Yeah, I mean, ever since he first reached out to me about doing rewrites on Expendables 2, we're not in constant communication. I mean, I don't go swim in his pool, but we are in communication. We are working together on things. Obviously, he's written the screenplay for the Levon Cade movie upcoming, and he wrote the screenplay, and his production company is involved in producing it. So we have a working relationship. But we've also done comic projects together and talked about various things. Working with him he's a story guy, and he's a Hollywood legend. Big mover and shaker in the film industry. Probably as hot now as he's ever been. But you forget all that. 30 seconds into talking to him, I'm talking to a guy who likes story, who likes writing, and we're speaking the same language. We're finishing each other's sentences, and it's really cool. I mean, he's just that kind of guy. I mean, testament that he's that kind of guy is the fact that he didn't forget about me the minute that the Expendables 2 deal didn't work out. He decided he liked my writing, he liked my approach, he liked my style of working with him, and wanted to continue the relationship. So, for which I'm grateful. And really, the best part of working with Stallone is getting to talk to Stallone. I really, really, really enjoy our conversations together. And I think a lot of the attraction, or a lot of the pros of working with me, is I'm not in the movie business. So I'm not thinking like a movie guy. And I think that's what he likes. Is my approach to this stuff is not the same. It's not cookie cutter. It's not, let's stick with what worked before, or conservation of risk. I'm a guy who's always saying, isn't there another way to do this? And apparently that's Stallone on set. I've heard, since I've gotten to work with him, I've gotten to speak to people who either work with him currently or have worked with him in the past. And they told me that that's the kind of guy he is on set. You bring him on your movie, even though he didn't write the screenplay or anything else, he's always saying, is there a better way to do this? We don't have to stick with what's on the written page. We don't have to stick with what's in the shooting schedule. If there's a better or entertaining way to get this information across. He's a showman, in the old Hollywood tradition. And anyway, if you want to see he and I working together, the Rambo graphic novel is at the printers. It'll be out soon. You can still order it through Splato Comics. And it's Rambo's first tour in Vietnam. It's called First Kill. Gus Stats. Has overuse of CGI helped fuel superhero burnout as well as stunting imaginations? Yeah, I watched a video recently, and it was by a video effects guy, a computer guy, but he was talking about the overuse of CGI. And he articulated something I've always thought, but he articulated, obviously because he's in the business, articulated a lot better. He's obviously thought a lot more about it. And he used the example of, in movies, a common thing, Smokey and the Bandit, Dukes of Hazzard, James Bond, of having a car leap a gap. And he said these scenes are always exciting because as a viewer, that there's someone in that car. You're supposed to be involved because it's the characters. It's Burt Reynolds and Sally Field in the car, and will they be injured or whatever? we all know it's a stunt person, but still, that car is physically flying off the end of that bridge toward what seems like an impossibly long distance toward the other end of that bridge. And will it make it? And we all know there's a very strong possibility that the version we're watching is maybe the third or fourth attempt. Maybe somebody died trying to do this. Okay, so it's all real. And that car can only go so far. And will it make it to the other side? And he contrasted that with like scenes from like Fast and Furious movies where cars do the same stunt, but it's all CGI. And he said, it doesn't have the same impact. It doesn't have the same level, nowhere near the same level of suspense, because we know there are no physical limitations. That what we're seeing is completely generated, out of zeros and ones. I mean, it's pixels. So if they want that car to jump to the moon, they can make it jump to the moon. So there's no real danger and there's no immediacy. And so we're not as engaged. We're not as involved. It's not as exciting. Sometimes the limitations of film spawn creativity. The entire film noir genre, which at the time that was being created in Hollywood in the 1940s and 1950s, they didn't think they were creating a new genre. They didn't. The term film noir would not come along for years. They were creating suspense dramas with B-level actors that were cheap to film and didn't require a lot of new sets, but did have the restrictions of not being able to be lit as well as normal Hollywood productions because they couldn't afford to drag all that lighting equipment out on location. And in some cases, simply couldn't afford the lighting, much lighting at all. So they had to come up with creative ways of filming these movies with the resources they had. And what the result, of course, is genius, because these people who are very, very good at making films are forced to rethink what they're doing and forced to think, well, what's the best way to do this within the limitations we have? A perfect example of this is Jaws, that uncooperative giant shark they built. Ended up in a lot of scenes that would have been laughable if the audience saw them. I mean, even here you can see this doesn't look like a real shark. But because of editing and everything else, I mean, they had to think about these things. How are we going to film these scenes that currently in 1975 are impossible? We don't have the technology. We can't do the things we want to do with this shark and make it believable. So we've got to rely on editing for the most part. We've got to think of what angles would work best. This lousy shark looks good from this angle, looks stupid from this angle. So, because of those limitations, they created what would have been, an okay thriller. I think really the limitations forced them to look at characterization and things like that. I mean, there was a lot of rewriting being done as this movie was being made. Famously, John Milius with his speech for Quint. Things like this, that they were moving on the fly, trying to figure out how to make this movie work. And those limitations forced them to make decisions or forced them to rethink things they would not have rethought if it was all CGI. I mean, the idea of miniature effects are more immediate, even though if it's a little bitty model ship on in a studio pool, doesn't affect the fact that it's real. It's a real ship, no matter what the size, on real water. And it also all seems more convincing, even though it's not. And I think that's why Hollywood more and more is turning, the big directors, Christopher Nolan and Ridley Scott and Peter Jackson, they still do miniatures. Now, these might be computer enhanced at the end, but the actual the fact they're shooting with miniatures informs the visual effects people of time of day, lighting, shading, all different things. I mean, all of the flight sequences in Top Gun, the recent Top Gun movie, were real airplanes, but they were masked over with CGI airplanes. I mean, the planes you see in the movie are not the same planes that they flew. But they were able to enhance those planes, change them to the planes they wanted them to be. But what it made it more convincing was the fact that they had the real flight film footage to go by, so they could match that. And it made it look more real because they were basing it on something real rather than something on just out of their imagination. I think what it boils down to is with CGI and the stories that CGI that they use with, that they utilize CGI on, the basis for me is if anything can happen, who cares what does? I mean, if it's an endless possibilities and you can ignore reality, you kind of leave the audience behind. They're not engaged anymore. And all of this comes into play with the superhero movies, which, quite frankly, rely way too much on CGI, and it's not good CGI. I mean, these movies look worse and worse, and less realistic, all the time. And the less realistic something looks, the less engaged you are, the less you are concerned with the fate of the characters involved, because they're not in any real jeopardy, they're not in any real danger, they're not even in a real place. And I think that takes all of us right out of the story, whether we're aware of this or not. Tracy Latham. When I was a kid, 1960s, 1980s comic books were mass distributed, inexpensive entertainment. I devoured Marvel, DC, Harvey, Charlton, Gold Key, Dell, and anything else that had interesting covers. That paradigm has changed. How have those changes improved or deteriorated comics as an art form and an industry? Is it possible to return in some degree to the old price and distribution paradigm? It hasn't affected comics as an art form. Comics as an art form are still vital. It has affected as a quote unquote industry, meaning that Marvel and DC's fortunes have fallen on hard times. And a lot of this has to do with the level of value and the level of exposure. You don't see comic books very many places, so kids don't know to buy them. Even when you do see them, the price tag is like, Mom, can I have a comic? No, I can't have a comic. I can buy a gallon of milk for what that comic costs. So no, you're not buying a comic book. When I was a kid, comics were a dime and then moved to 12 cents. So they were inexpensive, like you said, and they were everywhere. Literally everywhere you went, there were comic books. So kids aren't exposed to comics now. They are exposed to manga. Manga is in the bookstores, so they're exposed to that. So that's what they're reading. But a manga book that's value. It takes a while to read. Most manga books don't cost that much more than a 20-page American comic pamphlet, but there's so much more material, and they're better generally. Not to say that American comics are bad, but the current crop of creators at the big two are largely not that good. The craft is gone. And so manga is a better value all the way around, from page count to quality of story and art to level of interest and engagement. So why not buy manga? And will we ever return? Could it happen? Could they make comics cheaper? Yeah, they could make comics cheaper if they could get them to sell more. They could drop the price drastically if they produce stuff people would actually buy. The reason why they have to keep raising the price is because their audience is shrinking. So they're making the few readers they have left pay through the nose for the comic book reading habit. And, that road doesn't end anyplace happy. And we're seeing it. I mean, they don't make money. They're not profitable. And for a large part, they're not worth doing. That's why in crowdfunding, you see a very quick move away from doing individual pamphlet comics to doing graphic novels, trade paperbacks, 48 and 64 page specials, things like that. Largely done in one stories rather than continuing periodicals. So comic as an art is still healthy in manga and in book trade sales, but returning to the glory days of the standard periodical comic, those days are over, and that's nobody's fault but the major companies. It's not the reader's fault, because they just simply rejected comics they didn't want. They walked away. They voted with their wallets. In addition to the comic book companies abandoning the newsstand, making the comic books less available, therefore losing 2 generations of readers who will never look at American comic books because they're not in their purview. They're not something they see. They're not part of their culture anymore, which is really a pity. Very much a pity. But comics as an art form will continue on because there's so many people doing so many amazing things with it right now. So don't worry about comics. But it is sad. I get this question a lot. I do a series of Levon Cade novels, as I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, in the big broadcast here. But I get the question because Levon's Trade, the first book in the Levon Cade series, is being turned into a movie. Written by Sylvester Stallone, directed by David Ayer, and starring Jason Statham. And the questions I get are, Jason Statham is from England. Levon Cade is a guy from Alabama. How are they rectifying that? I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I don't know. I'm going to be even more perfectly honest with you. I don't care. They're making a movie from a book I wrote. I wrote a book. They're making a movie. They have different things driving them. Sly was very frank with me when he said he wanted to offer it to Jason Statham because Jason Statham was actively looking for a new action franchise. As Sly said, the guy just likes to fight. So he presented it to Jason Statham. Statham was working with David Ayer on the soon-to-be-released Beekeeper. It's already been released by the time you're hearing this, which looks to be, has all the hallmarks of being a successful action film internationally. And so the deal was put together. And the thing about it is, they're making a movie. I wrote the books. The movie will go out there, hopefully be very successful and spawn many sequels, become the franchise that Sly and Jason Statham wanted to be. But the books will still be there. It's like James Bond. The James Bond books and James Bond movies are very different. And there's fans of one or the other, or like me, both. But there's a difference between them. You can always go back and read James Bond. James Bond's still a big bestseller. Go back and read them. They're a different experience than movies. To some degree, he's a different character than in the movies. So I'm just not concerned about it. It's not like the movies are going to ruin the books. And the fact that the movie might be slightly different. I'm not one of these guys who wants to visit the set and be involved. And what are you doing to my fabulous creation? I have 2 Academy Award-winning screenwriters working on this movie, Sly and David Ayer. David Ayer apparently has done some rewrites, and people are like, oh, what did he do in the rewrites? I don't know. They didn't come to me, okay? They're making a movie. I don't know anything about making. I mean, I watch movies. I understand movies. I understand the language of film, but I don't know how to make them. So that's up to them. And it's in good hands. I'm sure. I mean, my biggest worry is, are they going to wuss out? And no, these guys aren't going to wuss out. Sly wuss out. The guy that made Fury and Sabotage wuss out. No, that's not going to happen. So I'm not concerned about. I'm just looking forward to seeing the movie when it comes out. So, and no, I probably won't be on the red carpet or go to any premieres. This stuff just doesn't interest me. As I've said over and over again, I like sitting here making stuff up, and that's spending time with my family, and that's really all that's important to me. Do I want the films to do well? Yeah, my name's on them. I'm involved, of course. Point of pride. I want the movies to do well, but I'm not going to get all involved with the how they changed them, what they altered, what they made different, and I advise you to do the same. Enjoy Levon Cade in every iteration. Do so often. Okay, that's it for me this week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for liking and subscribing and all the rest. And I'll see